Hey, Taofeek. All right, so you're doing some mech design, and that's cool. It's not my specialty, but I will do my best to help you out. So when I looked at this, the first thing that caught my eye really was how some of the values seem very mid-tone, and also these areas, like in the middle, they really blend in with like areas like the glove. So the first thing I would do if I was you is I would isolate all of the mech and probably make the background something that's a bit less contrasty. So I'm just going to do a quick and dirty isolation with the lasso tool. Just selecting this guy, and then I'm going to put him on his own layer. And I think you did a really good job with making these areas look shiny. You added some detailing, some patterning. That's always good to see. You did think about the cast shadow, which is great, and putting him in an environment, which is also very good. Material wise, I think you got the shiny parts looking good. But everything else I'm not really sure on. Like, I don't know whether the areas like the shoulder pads and things, whether that's supposed to be like plasticky, or if that's also made out of like a more matte metal. So that's something that's missing, is just a solid understanding of exactly what these elements are. And the other thing I noticed is that the design, it's okay. It's a bit on the stiff side. It's a bit boring, but sometimes mechs are supposed to be that way, right? Like, maybe you're going for that in terms of they're just utilitarian. They're not meant to be very sleek. So my personal tastes are towards a more streamlined design, but again, that's definitely not something you have to do if that's not what you're going for. And then I did think you did a really nice job on some of the connecting areas, like the arms, the elbow area. I think that's good. However, it seemed to be missing from the knees. I felt like the way you did the knees, they don't really make sense to me. I'm not sure how those work. Whereas the elbows, they do seem to make sense. You have these hinge joint. And I'm going to leave, I don't know if this is the background showing through here. If it is, it still doesn't quite make sense in terms of mobility for me. I imagine those are some kind of hydraulic thingamabobs. I don't know what you would call them, but that just elevate him or something. But it doesn't really function the way a knee should. And there's actually a really good tutorial that my friend Ahmed Al-Duri made, and it kind of covers this. And it's this tutorial here. How to draw mechs, and it talks about how there's the different types of joints and what each one does. So if you search for how to draw mechs tutorial by Ahmed Al-Duri, you should be able to find that, and that's a great resource. So, bleh. To get to this background, I think actually most of it, like this area, is quite well done. The lighter gray. Notice there's some artifacting going up here. You've got some parts that you forgot to color. That's fine. But this area behind him could be a bit lighter. So I'm just going to shrink him way down. And then just going to go ahead and lighten this. And that's going to pop him out, especially in the darker areas. And it's going to make the background less of a important element, but I think that's fine. The star of the show is the mech, not necessarily the background. So there we go. Now that helped. However, now the light area is a bit, down. So what I want to do is I'm going to add a levels adjustment so that we can crunch the values more. So you can see here, there's a lot of information missing in the darks and in the lights. And you've got a lot of information in the midtones. And this is saying basically all your shadows are around here, all your midtones are around here, and all your highlights are here. Now that's not the worst thing in terms of human skin. If this guy was made out of just flesh or marble or something, that's not terrible. It's still actually a bit too weak, but what I want to do is just crunch this so we get darker darks and then brighten up those lights, especially those lights, quite a bit. And maybe something like this. So I'm just adjusting that. And you can do this until it looks right, but there. Something like that, to me, it just feels better, Let's see. So just makes him stand out a bit more. And what's this? Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. That's the background. Put this in its own group so I don't get confused. All right. So you can see how much of a difference just that makes in terms of bringing him more prominence. All right. So now I think you could add more of a shadow underneath him, especially because he's very big, and so where his feet meet the ground, there's definitely going to be a very dark, hard shadow. It might not be spread out much, but it is going to be dark, and that's because just light's going to have a tricky time getting into there. And then we can go ahead and just, make a bit more of a dark shadow where his feet are. I'm just using a soft brush here. It's pretty default. And there we go. So that feels grounded. And now what I want to do is, first of all, I'm just looking for areas where things aren't quite working. I feel like this seems a bit awkward with the neck. I'm not quite sure what's going on, especially the way you've got the shapes going. And this is probably a drawing issue, where you've got like this shape and this shape. So like these two aren't the same size, it feels, right? Like look how narrow this one is and how wide this one is. Now, if he was turned this way, which it seems he is, like it seems like if this was a bean shape, like just a basic shape, it seems he's turned this way. But in this case, you would get more area shown on this side and less on this side. Like this side would be foreshortened, and you'd have the shoulder thing back here and this shoulder thing more in front. So that's really something that is a bit confusing, but I think we can probably fix it. Let's just grab some of this and move it in a bit. Okay. Just doing a quick and dirty edit, so forgive me for all the minor issues, but okay, so that's looking a bit better. And then this arm as well could be moved a bit. Might be a way of doing this by warping it and just bring that probably a bit lower. What I'm looking for is something that's a bit more mirroring the other side in terms of shapes. And you're getting like this. Because if it goes too high up, or actually yours were around here and here, right? This shape feels okay, but not great. Like, I almost feel like if you're going to push it really high up, just push it really high up. And then you at least got that, which feels more aggressive. Or else go for more of this flow. So you've got a flow going into the arms. So, okay, we've got this down. And then let's just tackle the knees. So I feel like the knees would be better if they had these types of joints that you have in the elbows. I think those are great. So you've got like you'd have a circle, and that would be sort of a circle on that side, and then you would have something similar on the other side. So this can move a bit more. So maybe something more like that. Something like that, maybe. I mean, again, I am no mexpert. I'm not a mexpert, but that could be better. Okay, and now, what else? I do feel like there are some speculars that are missing that you could add. Those are just those. You've got them here on the bright. They're very bright highlights, and they're basically just reflecting whatever the light source is. I feel like those aren't quite visible on this guy. So first of all, again, I think you did really good with this shiny area here on this. And I guess this is a different material right here around. Okay, well that's fine, but let's just keep this looking a bit more like chrome. Although, again, you did a pretty good job. I feel like you might get a bit more in terms of darks reflecting, and something like that might work better. And with chrome, you can actually get pretty dark as well in terms of where it goes dark. I feel like your values are a bit too timid. I think you could go a bit further with them, push them a bit more. And then we can go ahead and add some more speculars everywhere else. So like maybe think about the light. So the light's coming from directly above, maybe like here. I'm thinking of where does the light... So the light's going this way, and we're looking at this guy from this direction, right? So where is it that the light is perpendicular with our vision, and that's where I'm putting the specular? So in this case, maybe somewhere around here. And then here, maybe here. And I am just guessing at it, but I'm not, completely just putting it randomly. It is trying to imagine where the light is perpendicular, and you can see how that's sort of bringing these forms out in terms of rounding, making them rounder. And I think here is a good place for a highlight. Maybe, directly reflecting here. And on him, at corners like this is a corner between this front plane and this top plane and this side plane. That's sort of interacting. That's usually where you get some of these highlights as well. And then maybe directly on top of his head, you can get something showing like that. And this area, if this is going in, if his neck is going inside the suit and you want to create more of an overlap, which I think looks nice if you have a bit of varying levels of things, so some parts are in front and some parts go behind, I do think you would need a bit of a shadow in there to suggest that this neck area is deeper inside. And you could add some occlusion shadows. Now, let's see, do you have many occlusion shadows? You have not, you kind of have shadows here and stuff, but I feel like you could go much stronger with your occlusion. And what occlusion is just those really dark, it's here, you know, like how it's putting the shadows, where they're just super dark and it's where light can't get in. In most areas, light gets to bounce around a lot, but in areas of occlusion, it can't. And it's usually where two forms are touching and they're blocking light. So maybe within this area, you know, any area deep inside a form might get some occlusion. So even the knees here, maybe you catch a bit of occlusion there where light isn't able to get in. Definitely, you know, somewhere in this area where you have this plate and it's blocking light. Now, you also have cast shadows, which are different than occlusion shadows, because cast shadows are basically an object, like this plate, for instance, right here, is casting a shadow on something behind it, or that, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be behind it, but it's casting shadow because it's blocking light. So you need those as well. Okay, and we could darken some of your cast shadows as well. That might be good. So, all right, we've got that. Now, when it comes to this center part right here, I feel like in terms of just design, he's a bit boring because it's just like this to me. I see that big shape. If you could sculpt, I mean, you sculpted it in a bit with this area going inside. I think if you exaggerated that a bit, you know, it might not be completely realistic, but it does make it a bit more interesting, where his design is now this, and then a smaller area, and then this. And I think, you know, personally, I would go even further than that. I would really make this whole top portion perhaps bigger. And I forgot some more of the highlights, so let's just put those in, and maybe right there you get a highlight, and then on this leg form, probably on the edge, you know, corners and edges are places you'll see highlights. Right there, here probably, you know, if that form is coming out towards us, it's an opportunity for a highlight, and that also helps to show like this goes this way and then it goes that way. So right here, maybe a bit here, and then on the lip of this, you might get some highlight. All right, so that's something you can do. And then I kind of just want to try making him bigger, like wider. So let's just give that a shot. Just gonna take him, except for his legs and the middle portion, and I'm just going to, you know, scale him so he's wider. Now this might be a bit too extreme. Let's just tone it down a tad bit, but it feels just beefier to me. Feels like, okay, there's more of a personality to him now than there was before. All right, so something like that. And something else you could do, which you haven't really done, but it's a good way of leading the eye, and that is to add a soft gradient to him, like this robot guy, going from the bottom to the top. So what you have is really, okay, covered that up. Oops. It's easy enough to add in. I'll just make a color dodge layer. And color dodge is great for anything metal to bring back shine and stuff. So you can add that. So yeah, that gradient going from top to bottom. I'm going to make an overlay layer. I'm going to zoom him out. Actually, a multiply layer might work better. And I'm just going to, with a big brush, just select his silhouette. And starting at the bottom and then going up, I'm just going to hit him with some dark and then lightly fade off. So you got that. So now when you look at it, it's starting to look a bit like a toy because we're losing scale. But it does give you a bit of three-dimensionality. So here's a before and after. See how he kind of fits in the environment more? Because what you're saying is like the light is from the top and then it doesn't hit down below here. So that's something I think that's good to have. And what else? So with the color dodge layer, you can actually go ahead and put in some more shinies in areas. And what you can do is make your brush bigger than it needs to be. So this, like that highlight's pretty small, but I made my brush a bit bigger than it needed to be. And when you like tap it, what happens is you'll notice it kind of fades into the background as well. Like it just hits the areas, but it also affects the background. But that's kind of how light works anyway. Like it'll hit an area and it'll lighten it. So you do get this light blooming effect. And I think that's something that might be nice to include. Now on the multiply layer, I actually want to add some dimension to this area in the middle and really strengthen this idea of like this ribbed structure. I think it could be given a bit more information, definitely. And then I added some, like I just erased out where it goes over this form, so it feels like this form is doing this. Oops. It's doing this, right? Even here, it feels like it goes in and then out and then in and then out. I'm not sure if that was your original intention, but I think it looks fine. And then here, at his feet, I definitely want to add some more dark because it just feels like there's not as much dark. And that's fine in the sense of, you want the viewer to look at where the area of interest is. And this is not necessarily an interesting area, but it is something where it still needs more than what you have. Okay, so we have that. Now, something else you could do is and here I'm just adding a bit of shadow, just on the corners, like the turning surfaces, and that's going to make it feel a bit more round. You could add a bit of reflected light to some areas, especially like the arms. You've got like a dark outline here, right here. Oops. Right here. Got this dark outline. It doesn't need to be that dark because remember that there's no lines here. So if you actually added a light around it, and maybe that's suggesting that there's a light off screen to this area, that could, actually be nicer than having a dark edge, because, this is suggesting that there is not a line. Like this is not a drawing. This is a painted object or a real object. It's not just we don't just have lines around objects, because really lines don't exist except they're just where the form is turning around, like away from the light, and it makes it look like it gets darker sometimes, but sometimes it gets lighter, and sometimes there isn't a value change at all. But adding this kind of rim light is going to help pop out some of this form, especially against the background, because now you have more contrast. You have dark against light and like light against dark. So pretty much that's it instead of the time. I mean, in terms of the time instead of the time. Sorry, I'm just terrible with words right now. It's what happens when I draw and I talk. I seem to just, brain fart all the time. Just extreme mental flatulence. All right, and here I'm just, softening some of these hard edges. You want those hard edges, but maybe not that hard in terms of you want the value shifts, but it can be softened just a bit, it's not gonna hurt. Maybe some more darker shadows here. And for this area, this white thing, I'm gonna assume that you're going for something bright. So again, what you can do is allow some of that to hit it with light and let it blur out a bit. So you can draw it. It's fine. See, it's fine to draw it as white first, but then once you add that, it really feels like it's glowing. And yeah. So, all right, let's just do a quick before and after. So before, after, before, after. Sorry if I made him too much like a toy, but you can get the idea, I hope. And you do get this feeling of, just as far as I'm concerned, it's a more interesting shape where you've got like this V happening and then the circle, which is more masculine, it's like, oh, he's big and strong, as opposed to here, it just feels a bit too much like a box. So, yeah, pretty much that's what I would do. And then in terms of the composition, it's a bit empty here. I get it, you've given him some space to be looking off screen, I guess, but I don't think you need to do that much. Maybe even that is fine. Something like that, maybe. So, yeah, I hope this helped, and thanks for watching.